working on something. Yeah, how did you find that approach to working on things by getting into that group or small groups and then working through a particular challenge? So let's start with the approach, then we'll look at the content in terms of what you came up with. We'd like to just share their reflections. Alicia, you can unmute. Please unmute and share.
Hi Ed. Hi everyone. I just wanted to say I was in a group with Mohit and Rasa, and it was so great because they have such wisdom, experience, great perspectives and ideas. So I think it was so nice to be in a group where we were strictly focusing on solutions and being able to discuss, which is, I think, unique, compared to when you maybe are talking with friends and you're just one of the 4 C's we were talking about, the complaining and all of that. So it was nice to be solution focused with people who have such great ideas.
Excellent. By the way, Ronnie, I'll just answer your question. We'll probably close in about 20 minutes. Is that okay for you, first of all? Do you need to leave earlier? Okay, that's okay.
No, I can make that work, and yeah, I don't want to miss out, so just checking so that I can manage my other.
No problem. And the time change hit me too as well. I definitely get that. So there's been a one weekend recently when
it's a great time change. I finally see you all again. I'm loving it.
Actually, it works for me better now, but in 2 weeks again, it will change again.
Oh, okay, no worries. So I'm just going to ask the other group then. So Alicia, thank you for sharing in terms of how your group experienced this approach. I'm going to ask the group that was Avni, Ronnie, Christina, how did you experience it? I think it was Ronnie and Avni. So we're not talking about the content yet. We're going to come to that in a moment, but just the approach. How did that feel? How did you find it?
I thought the approach was great. Christina was not able to participate because she's dealing what she's dealing with, but the parenting challenge that I had, which is my approach to parenting, where it's a bit laissez-faire, coming from the world of, don't force kids to do this, don't make them do that, don't make them do what you want, got misinterpreted to me as, well, take a laissez-faire approach, they will just sprout the way they sprout, and I found that I was not involved with their school homework. I could see the grades dipping and other stuff, and I'm like, no, hang on, I need to actually be a bit more in-depth involved. And hearing from Avni's contribution, whose kids are older, she has a daughter who's an amazing golfer, so there's clearly something she's acing in the parenting game, and to get her contribution that actually she started with that structure and rigidity, and now that those values and principles are ingrained in them, now there's that giving that freedom of their own self-expression to emerge, right? And so, the recent shift I've made around my involvement in parenting and being more diligent about it, so that there's a bit more regularity in my involvement. It's not when I'm free, but it's scheduled. Gives me some comfort in hearing from a parent who's gone through this before me.
Fantastic. Okay, so first of all, thank you all for sharing about the approach. Now what we want to do is hear your best practices. Okay, so we're going to go back to the group of Alicia, Mohit, and Rasa. So just for my benefit also, what exactly was the challenge that you were focusing on? What were the ideas and best practices that you came up with? Then we'll do the same for the other group. Whoever in your group would like to speak on behalf of your group.
I can start and share the challenge, and then Mohit and Rasa can share their wisdom. So the challenge I was experiencing, Ed, I think it was before you joined the call, I was sharing, I left my job in December and to work on my life coaching business. And I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have all this time. And I found that the truth hit me that it wasn't necessarily my job, it was taking up a lot of time. But since leaving my job, I'm experiencing the same time challenges because all of my bad habits around going to bed super late, waking up late, have now manifested in me not actually having as much time to do what I want. And I'm just feeling like, yeah, it's not the ideal schedule for me, and Mohit and Rasa were helping me to, have compassion for myself for that. But it truly, I think it's come to the point where, yes, I was resting, but now it's feeling like it's actually not making me feel good. The rest, and not the rest, but the way I've scheduled myself. So that was sort of the issue, like how to up level these bad habits now that I have more things that I want to kind of accomplish. So
Okay.
I can let them share some of their wisdom.
Please.
I don't know about wisdom. You know what they say about wisdom? It comes with making a lot of mistakes. So that's, no, we were just saying that, for us, Ross and I think the number one thing for us was just having a spiritual routine that would really motivates us into a pattern that's more
A routine.
that's more conducive what we're looking for. So we have our own, early morning spiritual routine that we get excited for. And we know that if we don't do it early in the morning, that it becomes a challenge because we're committed to it. So that was one. And then Alicia, I think the second thing that you brought up was very important too, is a fitness routine that you can be committed to as well. That helps kind of create that discipline of what you're looking for. Those were the two things in the rest.
Yeah, I mean, like on the level of compassion, right? Outside of the building those, really core routines in your day, the compassion had to do with that we talked about is the fact that, the capitalistic society such as ours, where, you're taught to have no limits, where you're taught to, rest is not productive, that you have to be productive all the time. You have to kind of decompress, and you have to I guess, in a way, reprogram your mind to think of, limits as being a healthy thing, to think of rest as being a healthy thing, and that it's really important to recharge and to have a balanced approach to life so that you can allow room for creativity. You can allow room for your brain to be at an optimal level where it's not, so taxed and so full of things that it can't, think clearly, or it can't operate at its self-optimal level. So there's a lot that goes into that, and there's it's sort of this internal transformation that we all have to go through eventually. And I was telling Alicia, I mean, we're at an age where we realize that if you don't find that balance to some degree over your life, then your body will find it for you, force you to find it at some point. And so it's really important to, keep that in mind, that, you're not wasting time. You're not, weak because you have limits that know are going to keep you healthy in the long run.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Very interesting. I'm going to throw it out to Ronnie, Avni, Christina, Rikin, if anyone has anything to add to that in terms of any other insights to add to that challenge before we come to the next group. So this was around up leveling bad habits, and also especially around the whole kind of time, and that kind of, scheduling, etc. Is anything, because again, we all have so much experience. Is anything that you guys do, and that's to those who've not spoken yet, that you found have helped in this area?
I just wanted to share that I've gotten more comfortable with failing multiple times and trying to, course correct or to realign or even try to develop something new. That just getting comfortable in that space, but to always pick myself up and to keep trying is to me what I'm just, accepting as the most important thing.
Thank you. And I'll just add to that, because I think that's a really important point. When we try to change a habit, we should expect that it may not work many occasions. If we have that right expectation, then we don't give up. But if I want to change a habit and it doesn't work straight away, then I may feel frustrated, disappointed, and that may hold me back from keeping that momentum to actually get to that conclusion. I'm going to go to Ronnie, then I'm going to go to Avni. Ronnie, anything to add? Because we want to learn from each other, and you all have experience and insight, please.
Yeah, I think the only thing I say or I do is that first we want to replace bad habits with good habits, but there are many good habits that will look like good habits, but they're also shiny object syndrome, which is, hey, that's a great thing you guys are doing. I'll take that. I'll join those classes. I'll do that. And sometimes then they're a distraction. So key focus is having that whole point or focus on the summit, which is your personal mission statement or your marriage or couple mission statement, and or that dharma. And then the question is, do I put that habit in? Is that habit that I'm putting in, what do I need to fulfill on that mission? And is that getting me closer to that mission? So it really helps me with just daily decision making. Like me going to that club or that social contributes nothing with me getting closer to my mission. So why should I go do that today? Right? And it looks good because everybody's going, it's social, let me go do it. But it completely sways you from getting closer to that mission. And since we've done our personal mission statements in this thing, you can now look at that alongside which habits contribute to that. And then it's easier to know which ones to put in place and which ones actually, they add no value to getting us there. So why do we have them?
Thank you very much, Ronnie. I'm going to go to Avni. What would you like to share, please, Avni?
So I mean, probably lots of people have said it, but a very beautiful thing I've learned from Robin Sharma is that what gets scheduled gets done. And if I haven't written it in my calendar, I don't get it done 100%. But if it's down in my calendar, that tight bubble of total focus, he says, is that no notifications, no calls, nobody's allowed to disturb you. You just focus for 45 minutes. Whatever you want to achieve, you can get it done, whether it's exercise, whether it's concentrating on that program that you've put out, whether it's actually anything. Tight bubble of total focus, and what gets scheduled gets done. That for me has worked. And also, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I mean, it reminds me, there's a person there's an author called Cal Newport, and he wrote a book called Deep Work. You may have heard about it. And he actually talks about this, that we have to carve out time for focused activity. In fact, I was looking at this morning, but I'm not sure if I'm going to get this, but there are apps now which you can put in what you need to get done, and they use artificial intelligence. And if you don't get it done, the calendar app will automatically reassign it for another day and another time. You see, and in that way, it doesn't allow you to just kind of miss stuff and drop stuff off, because it just rearranges automatically your schedule until you've actually completed that thing. So if you don't do it on Tuesday, it's going to put in your schedule automatically for Wednesday. And only when it's done will it drop that particular task from your schedule. So there are apps like that. And there's one in particular, which I don't know if it's any good. So I'm just giving you the name so you can look this up for yourself. There's one app called the Motion app. And so it's designed in such a way that if you put something into your schedule using that app, it will follow up with you until it actually is being done. Okay, so just something on that side of things. Ronnie, you want to say something?
No, I just want to say, is it Motion or Notion?
No, Motion, M-O. My wife uses the Notion app. That's the different app. Yeah, Notion's good.
Okay.
But my wife, she swears by it. But this is the Motion app, M-O-T-I-O-N. Yeah.
Okay. Because my nephew is a tech geek. He's over from London visiting us, and he saw us meetings. They said, "You guys have to get on Notion." So he just mentioned that. I haven't looked it up, and now you mentioned Motion, so I was just checking.
Yeah. So my wife uses Notion. Is very good though, because it's a brilliant app for note taking and pulling it in such a way you can make connections between different notes. So when you go into one set, it can link to other things that you've written. It's a very, very good thing. My wife swears by it, but that's not the app that I'm talking about. Anyway, let's go to the other group now. So then we want to hear from Ronnie and Avni. So if you could just tell us exactly what was the challenge you were focusing on, and then what were your ideas underneath that particular heading. Either of you, feel free to share.
So if you don't mind, Ronnie, can I say my particular challenge, and then because I think that your input was amazing. So the challenge is that in a family unit you have father and mother, so two leaders, as they say, and if the challenge I have is when the leadership, the values are not aligned, and therefore the goals are not aligned, which the implication is disconnect, huge disconnect. So there could be core values that bring you together, but then as you develop through life, the people you surround yourself by, what your likes and your dislikes form your values, or your values form your likes and dislikes and goals. So that was a challenge, and I'd like Ronnie to explain the solution, so which I'm going to apply today.
Yeah, no, I was just suggesting first of all, is obviously you're distinguishing or discerning and sharing with your partner that first of all, there is this misalignment. And if we continue to stay the same, then there continues to stay the gap. And not necessarily to forecast that it will be doom or gloom, but the gap continues in existence unless we do something as a pattern interrupt. And so as a pattern interrupt, what do you create? I use the word game, and something we did in this family, which is what are the values we're aligned with, like love and unity. All of us in the family say there's love and unity, but there was no action or event in a week to say, hey, that's the thing we're doing each week that demonstrates we're taking actions aligned with our commitment as family. And in our family, we introduced something about 6 years ago called Sunday gratitude calls. And the first time we introduced it, it was a laughing matter in the family. Say, what is this woo-woo stuff? And you're becoming wussy and soft and blah, blah, blah. And people would come on the call and there'd just be taunts and jokes and mockery and diminish it. But now, 6 years on, every Sunday, and this is when you have a global family that initially we lived in the same house, but once you go global, we didn't readjust the reporting structures, the communication structures. We didn't put anything in place. And so then it starts to break down. And when we created the Sunday gratitude call, where you come on for 15 minutes and every person has to share 3 things you're grateful for, it's completely changed the family culture. Now it's like normal to ask at the end of a week, at the end of a day, after a meal, during a holiday, what are 3 things you're grateful for, and go around. That's a normal family conversation. But it's had us get an appreciation of what the other person's dealing with, because we have a fixed, outdated listening of them. And the second one was like, what is that thing that the second piece of advice to Avni was, what is that thing that your partner does really well, where you're like, hey, that's what you really do great. And that's one of the bits that I'm aligned with as well. You find that commonality. And that's like a small spark amongst all the other things that are misaligned. But what can we do to fan that spark, to turn that into a big flame and grow that? Like, so what is that one common denominator that we both have and both agree on amongst the many that we don't? And let's start by fanning that one and increasing that, whether it's an activity we do weekly, a hobby, a conference we can both be interested in and go to. That will start to build the communal interests and alignment of values of kids and the parents and the partners with each other.
Wonderful. Okay, so again, and this is right why we want to do this activity, because and I really want to encourage this, especially with this group. You have like huge amounts of not just experience, but insight. So things that you've read, things that you've heard, things that you've seen other people try, along with things that you've tried yourself and things that you've experienced yourself as well. That's at least 5 dimensions of experience. At least 5 dimensions of experience. So what we want to try and do is, when we have a challenge, we want to create that space. And I think you've created that space because of the way the team has been and the journey we've been on. We can create a space, we can throw out a challenge and get the collective intelligence of the entire group to come to it. I'll just tell you honestly, I find that it's been such a game changer in my own life. I was speaking to Rikin about just one situation that I was involved in, someone that I know who's going through something, but who's also has a certain responsibility that they've now dropped. And I was asking him, and some of the things he told me, I thought, I've heard that before, but I needed to hear it again as a reminder from someone else to come like, yeah, that's right. That's what I should do. And I was just making notes as he was sharing it. Now, there's a very interesting point that's made in one Vedic literature called the Bhagavatam. Anyway, the point that it makes, that's been made, actually it's in the commentary. It points out how it's so useful to get fresh insight from other people, because sometimes, and you can raise your hand if you know what I mean, sometimes we even know what to do, but because of our strong feelings at the time, we feel like doing something different, right? So you see that 2 tracks, right? So sometimes if your friend has an issue, you're going to advise them, no, you should do X, Y, and Z. If you have the same issue, you don't act like that. you do something very, very different. So sometimes our strong feelings can cause us to act differently to the way that we would advise other people to act in exactly the same situation. And then sometimes that leads to us making a wrong choice, and then we have to pay a price for it by having to do a lot more work to fix the whole issue. So I want to encourage you, we're going to continue this kind of theme as we go through, that whenever you need to, either on this call or, you know, aside from the call, sometimes it's good to bounce things off people just to reinforce the best possible solution, the best possible decision, which is automatically related to the best possible outcome. I've studied this over many years, and I've seen that many people, I'll be honest, have wasted time and energy and relationships because they knew one thing and they did something different. And I don't blame them, but I understood that what has helped me to avoid that sometimes is by bouncing things off another person who can help to reinforce the right way to behave. Even if I don't feel like doing that particular thing, because their objective is like, yeah, I know you don't feel like doing it, but you and I both know that actually the best thing to do in the long term is to take this approach. And then what that does is it sometimes counteracts maybe how I'm feeling emotionally, because it gets me back in touch with, yes, you're feeling this way and you have a right to express how you feel. But if you look at it objectively, you know, actually, if you want the best outcome, you should go in this direction. So Avni, I saw your hand up, please.
Sorry. Yeah, I hear you, and I agree. But in many ways, and as you said, in this particular group, we have a group of people who have a lot of exposure to various sources. So it's very, I find it's very important to be very careful of where you gain that information from. In NLP and in other things, we call it, in terms of modeling, you have to find people who are performing things in an excellent way. That's what I would say in terms of to be able to get that constructive feedback and approach. That's just an input I wanted to say, because it's not the type of thing I would sit down and discuss with all of my friends, but in this particular circle, in other expert circles, I would do it. So yeah, that's just the point.
I think that's a completely valid point to take on board. I'll like to add one other thing to what you're sharing, which I think is very, very useful. You know, I'm going to give you a very interesting example. There was a girl that I was attracted to when I was at school, right? A very, very attractive person, but I was so shy. So one time, so she asked me out, and because I was so shy, I kind of just completely dropped the ball. But what was interesting about it is that I saw, I got some resentment towards my parents in relation to that, because my parents had given me a certain view of, you know, of a certain, you know, situation, and I thought, therefore, that fed into my not taking that opportunity in one sense. But what I realized, and this is very, very important, was that ultimately I'm responsible for every decision that I make. Even if people give me feedback, suggest something, it's still the final arbiter, the final arbiter, the final evaluator of all those different perspectives is ultimately me. If you give me feedback and I do it and it doesn't work out, I can't blame any of you. You've given me your input, you've given me your ideas, but I also have to say, okay, to what extent, how, in what way does that, if it's applicable, does it apply to my situation? So I'm going to add to what you're saying, Anthony, which is completely correct. I would say that we should do ultimately what we have accepted to be best, and we should always do it with the understanding that I take full responsibility. I've received advice, but I take full responsibility for evaluating it and for deciding if I follow, and if I do follow, how I follow. Because sometimes advice is giving a general directive, and sometimes it's good, but sometimes it fails because the way it's applied wasn't so expert. Sometimes it's giving a directive which is wrong, right? And then it doesn't matter how you apply it, it's going to fail. But so there's many different combinations, but I always want to be conscious that whatever I've decided to do, even if it was given to me by other people or suggested by other people, I always want to understand that ultimately it's my responsibility. If I decide to go along with it, I have to take full responsibility for that. So I'm just adding to what you're saying, Anthony. I think there's a key point. Always evaluate the advice and see if it's useful, to what extent it's useful, and if it's useful, to how do I know it needs to be applied based upon who I am, what I'm dealing with, and where I am in my life at this time. Anthony, was there something you wanted to add, or because I saw your hand up?
Yeah, we do that in entrepreneurial organization where we have to be gestalt, and we have to talk from a space of the person giving the advice, or the point has to talk from their own experience. I have done A, B, and C, not you should do A, B, and C. This is what I have done, and this is how I've experienced it, and these are the results I've got. So then automatically the other person receiving it doesn't feel that pressure of, or even have the opportunity of blaming anybody, because the person opposite is just expressing exactly what they have experienced and how they, so it's very interesting.
And thank you. That's so interesting, because what I've learned from you, Anthony, is also the language is very, very key. The language that's used, because I can imagine that sometimes a person is giving their perspective and the person receiving it may feel like they're obliged to go along with it. Whereas, to be honest, if I use something for me to learn, if I use the right language, then they know it's a gift that's being put out there, but it's not something that's being imposed upon another person. Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that. I'm conscious, I know you've been on the call for quite some time, so I think we're going to close the session here, because I think it's been an hour and a half in terms of everyone's engagement, and we will continue on in our discussions in next week's session. But please feel free to always reach out, bounce ideas off each other. We call this a mastermind group, that we're drawing upon the collective experience, intelligence, and insights. So sometimes my BT Swami told me this once. He said, even if you think you know the answer, it can often be very useful to still bounce it off another person, because they may detect a certain blind spot that we haven't seen, either in the direction or in the implementation of that direction. And that can make us even more successful, and it's likely to minimize the likelihood that what we're doing can go wrong. So thank you so much for reminding us all about that. We hope you found the session to be useful, and we look forward to continuing next week. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Loved it. Thank you so much, everybody. Have an
Thanks,
awesome
guys. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for looking. Bye.
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 Thank you. I'm going to stop recording.
Yes.